Good evening, all of you. I requested to the moderator to start the A1. It's time to start now. Please start.
Okay, thank you all, and I would like to welcome and good afternoon. And today's presenter is Dr. Surafel Malaku from Bahar Dar University, and it is his citizenship is Ethiopia, and he have PhD holder. Please, all of you are unmute your microphone to be hearable. Please, I would like to say all of the participants unmute your microphone to be the training to smart. I am Isaac Nuguse, yesterday's presenter, and Dr. Surafil Malaku, PhD dissertation is entitled The Measurements of Measuring Multidimensional Vulnerability to Poverty. And he is master's in economic policy analysis from Addis Ababa University. He have engaged in a lot of short-term training, like as executive project managing given by South Africa, and also he engaged in urban environment and bioeconomic learning platform organized by GTC and Bioeconomic Association. And he engaged in short training, health financing, evaluation of health policy organized by ISS, and well as a logical framework analysis organized by CRD, as well as right-based approach to develop intervention given by Action Aid Ethiopia. And he have a lot of experience, especially since 2008. He's a lecturer in Bahar Dar University, as well as he promoted assistant professor by Bahar Dar University. And he have different activity performance, like as he teach both graduate and undergraduate students within economics and finance. He is also the supervisor of MSc thesis. He evaluates MSc thesis from different university, as well as he developed the different PhD, MSc, and BA level curriculum, as well as he prefer different distance module in Bahar Dar University. He also held different team leader and different expert position, well as he is also consultant of different, seems like as preparing 10-year strategic plan for Bahar Dar political aspect, as well as he engaged in a consultant of World Bank group for the period of over 2020, well as he evaluates a 10-year performance of integrated development plan of Bahar Dar University, Bahar Dar City, Ethiopia. He is also the senior member of consulting team of tracing agroforestry farm optimization project. He also engaged in socio-economic analysis, innovator of a laboratory for a small-scale irrigation project that is held by Ethiopia. Also, he engaged in equity-focused situational analysis of women and children in Amara region, as well as he evaluates a 5-year performance of strategic plan, like as a measuring multidimensional poverty in a small town of Amara region, Ethiopia. And he assesses why is Amara region manufacture sector is lagged behind, and he estimates different VAT, like as a tax, VAT, and agro investment gap in Amara regional Ethiopia. and and there are different way of summary activity like as managing and leading academic, administrative, research and community service in business and economics, Bahardar University. He preparing a full administration annual and project budget breakdown in the college, which is Bahardar University College of Business and Economics, and he is one of a Senate member in Bahardar University. He developed the annual and strategic plan for Bahardar University College of Business and Economics. He established a research project link with other stakeholder. He teach a research provision of a community service, and he is one of Amara Development Association member, and like as progress office, like as developing training material, conducting baseline assessment in project area, organizing workshop and consulting meeting, develop fundable project proposal, preparing annual work plan, conducting and program mentoring and evaluation. And he have a different experience in a different national and international projects, and preparing different proposal, fundable proposal for Ethiopia as well as international, seems like as a World Bank. And he have a published material like as uh, impacts of small scale irrigation technology and woman employment in Amara region, regional Ethiopia. His publication on like as a measure of multidimensional vulnerable to poverty in Ethiopia, Scopus Index, impacts of small scale irrigation technology in nutrition well-being of the children in Amara region. He published like as the impacts of plantation forest in Toge district, Ethiopia. And he also published the effects of poverty on household vulnerable to HIV/AIDS infection in Bahadar city, northwest Ethiopia. And he also published has a participation in urban and pre-urban agriculture contributes to poverty reduction and food security. It's the case of Bahadar city. And he also speak English excellent, fluently speak in English and Amharic. And now he is a PhD holder from Punjab University of India. I would like to thank you all and welcome to begin this international training in research method in economics, Bahardar University. Now, I would like to say welcome Dr. Surafel Malaku from Bahardar University. Just today's section is a time series analysis in econometrics. Just as economics, we do have different data like cross-sectional data, time series data, and panel data. Today, we try to in day one and day two, we try to deal about in day one about the introductory part, how to write research in economics. In day two, we try to deal about the introductory parts of Stata software. Now we try to deal about, we stay with Dr. Malaku in entitled with time series analysis in econometrics. We try to deal about what mean in introductory parts of time series, analysis of stationary and non-stationary time series data, and unit root, ordinary order of integration, level, drift, and trend. We try to deal about a lag selection that presented by Dr. Surafel Malako from Bahardar University. Thank you all. I would like to say thank you, the coordinator, the participant, and the speaker. And now I would like to invite Dr. Surafel Malaku and welcome, Doctor. And you can start today's section. Thank you very much, all. I am Misak Nugusi from Mizan Tepe University.
Okay. Thank you very much, Isaac, my former student, and all the participants of this wonderful workshop. This wonderful workshop. I'm really happy. Yes, I'm really happy to be part of this novel workshop, because Misantepe University is one of already the very new universities, but it is already making a very tremendous and remarkable progress. And organizing this workshop is by itself is a big achievement. And I would like you all, the organizers, to congratulate you. And I'm also happy to be part of this training workshop. And I've got an opportunity to share my views regarding the topic of time series econometrics. And there is also a Nigerian or friend from Nigeria. You are also welcome. Generally, Isaac has already expressed myself more than what I am really now, because one of my experience so far is that I was already a teacher as well as a researcher at the university, and usually my interest areas this time is both teaching and engaging research in the areas of ultimately welfare economics. And we have already a number of projects that are already linked with bringing transformation in the rural areas and urban contexts of Ethiopia, as well as documenting learning platforms as well. So this time, I would like to share my views on the very introductory part of time series econometrics, so that both of you are from the academic sector. So it is not a very generic session that can bring very advanced levels, rather a refreshment training that I will design. That's why. So then that is there is an echo. I don't know why. There is an echo.
ዶክተር ሱራፌል
Yes.
አይ እነዚህ እንትን የሚሉ ሰዎች አንሙት ካልሆኑ እዚህ ጊዜ ማጥፋቱ ራሱ እንትን አይመስለኝም እና አንሙት የሚሆኑበት እንትን መጀመሪያ ይሰራ ጥሩ ነው። አንተም ጊዜህን ማጥፋት የለብህም። እኛም በተነሳስ
Okay.
አመናል ብለን ነው የተሳተፍን ያለን።
Okay. So this is the general case. So the point that I am going to cover here is what's wrong with that? So the point that we are going to cover today is include what is the very nature of time series all about? Why are we going to deal about time series? What makes this time series a bit different from usual data that we know, the traditional data type. This time series has a different nature. And another, so we will going to cover about some time to understand what the nature of time series is. And after that, we'll see, okay, one of the basic assumptions that we build where we are dealing with our time series analysis is about the concept of stationarity. And so this is a very critical assumption that everyone should keep while dealing with time series data. Unless the time series is a bit stationary, becoming stationary, then all the whole system, the regressional output that we are going to make is completely, and we will generate fabulous outcomes that should be tackled at the end of time. So we have to understand, okay, what stationarity is, what are the requirements that a data should satisfy to be stationary, and what should be done if the data is found to be non-stationary. So that remedial action should be taken ahead of time. So all this could be considered in the second section. Another important concept that I have to be very aware about time series regression is this concept of spurious regression. Then the name spurious is somehow already a sort of false regression, meaning that the series looks like smart, but practically mean the two or more variables may not have already a very valid synergy among our services, among the series themselves. So as a result, we have to identify, okay, we have to be very carefully examine whether the regressions that we are going to make in time series data is really true and reflecting the reality or something that is misleading because of the very nature of the data. And that is the concept of spurious regression. We'll be informed about this one. And one of the serious problems of non-stationarity is it will lead us to spurious regression. We'll see that. Another important concept that I have to cover this one is that, okay, we know the macroeconomics and microeconomics, there is a time horizon of planning that is short run and long run. And as far as we are dealing about time series data, dealing long run and short run issues should be part and parcel of our analysis. So we have to establish then the long run relationship between time series variables x and y t's, for example. Then that concept, whether there is long run or short run relation between the two, is we call it the co-integration between these. Then we are going to deal about this long run. Another important issue is that along with the long run trend, there are ups and downs in the key macroeconomic variables over the long period of time. Then these ups and downs are already short-term fluctuations. And this is called, we call them the error correction mechanisms. And we'll cover this one partly, how can already short-run and long-run are going to be treated inside time series data is an area that we are going to cover as well. Then after we have already covered this important issues, the theoretical framework of the first three issues, then we will see, okay, then how we can already going to use Stata to address this stationarity, spurious regression, co-integration, and error correction will be complemented with a hands-off on Stata. Then we'll give some time on this side so that we'll be familiar about the concept theory and the hands-on using Stata. And these are the points that I am going to cover in today's session. Any question, anything you have, any point, you can raise your hand at any time. So let me begin with the nature of time series data. Time series begin from the first one. Then what's after all time series data? What is it? Now this is already time series is a sequence of observations or measurements of the data. Very different. Ultimately, we have already three different forms of data types. Cross-sectional, meaning that irrespective of time, we will collect a sample of observations from a certain targeted population. That's already we call the subscript IYR. But there is another time that we could collect, meaning that time is a very critical matter, that GDPs will be, for example, GDP is going to be collected in Cyprian context, for example, everywhere we already collect GDP data and already produce GDP output. And there is also consumption spending, investment, government spending, and the likes, many supply and others. These are ultimately functions of time, meaning these data are data going to be collected as over a sequence of time. This time variable could be either, okay, weeks, days, months, year, or somehow decades. Okay, then this is a series that we are going to collect the data over a series of time, unlike the cross-sectional data. And the panel data that Hitachi will cover by tomorrow or after tomorrow will be already panel data that do have already both the characters of both time series and a cross-sectional setting. Is already meaning that the data that are subscribed by an index T, YT, XT, and the likes, we call it time series data. Generally, that we collect over time. Another important concept that I have to understand from this time series data is the concept of stochastic. This is another key concept that I have to make very clear. You have to make yourself very clear. Now, we are going to deal about economics, and we are going to see that for information is ultimately scaled from economics to others. And without that, what one of the root causes that makes economics a social science is that because it is not going to be carried out in a very controlled environment, a laboratory setting, because there are a number of stochastic shocks that do have already a significant influence on the dependent variable that are beyond our control as well. So that means that if the data is deterministic, there is exact relation between variables x and y, meaning that there is no error at all. Meaning that if there is, for example, if there is some change, for example, y is equal to function of x, then we can establish some linear trend, for example, y is equal to beta or beta on x. Then meaning that when x changes by 1 unit, y changes by beta amount. So it's completely deterministic, no other error. This is true only in laboratory. For example, a chemist can produce water in a laboratory by combining 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen. Determining there is no error at all. So this means that the variables between the two are completely different. Another important concept is that determines the time-dependent future values this determined process can be calculated. Meaning, if there is no error, we can calculate what will be the change in y as the result of the change in x. So that's completely independent from partial derivative of, for example, the impact of the change in x, the impact of the change in consumption as a result of the change in already rise in income could be income is the sole determinant of consumption. Then beta one amount will be we can already use to calculate. That is a very basic issue. We can calculate it. For example, this is a very good example. The amount of saving in your account, and this remark saving is a function of time. That could be accumulated over a course of time. The amount of saving in your account is the sum of initial deposits. That is denotes plus the interest rate that was accumulated over the course of time. So this implies that you will get deposit 100 per today in the bank, and if you go after a year, then if the interest rate is 10%, after a year, you will find the amount of money that's accumulated in your bank account will be 110 per. No error at all. This is completely deterministic. So that is the issue that we have with deterministic. And the key element is the stochastic process that we have to be very curious. What is the stochastic process? This stochastic is a random process. Random process is a collection of random variables ordered in time. So this is a collection of random process. This is random process. So this is a collection of random variables. The variables are collected randomly now. So the concept of randomness is coming into time. I start mute ማድረግ አይቻልም የሚረብሽን ድምፅ So this is a collection of random variables. So another important concept is that. So meaning the element of randomness comes into play.
Hello, doctor.
Yes?
Hello, doctor.
Yes.
Hello.
Await.
Please, all of the participants, please. mute your microphone. There is a disturbance. Please, all of. Hello, 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 hello. Please, there is existence of disturbance. Please mute your microphone. Hello. Amendin Henos Katama Tidane Kifle, please mute your microphone. Sorry, Doc. You can start now.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. So one important element that the data that collected is random. The variables are random, that are collected randomly. Another important issue is that time series is one of the possible realizations of the stochastic process. Among the random process, the amount of data that we could collect over a length period of time is considered to be a sample, and the sample is already equivalent. The sample, we call it a realization in time space, and this realization equivalent to the sampling the cross-sectional setting. Because, for example, when we collect GDP data, consumption data, saving data over the course of time, for example, 1990, 1991, 1992, we will collect only one data. For example, the amount of GDP in Ethiopia, for example, during 1990 is already 4 billion, 1995 billion. This is realization. But we assume that this realization was extracted from the very big domain, the universal set, that is the population, from the stochastic process, because it was assumed that had it been already some shock that happened during that period, if there is some war, this figure could be different. So there is a possibility that this should be different. The one that is realized and collected is called a random process, and we call it realization, equivalent to the sample in cross-sectional issue. So, as far as we are talking about random process, as far as we are concerned about this random process, we can't calculate future values because this is a model for determining. It is a random sample. We cannot calculate, but we can note about the probability of success. Meaning, if we are going to probability, we are not 100% sure about the data or the series. Meaning that there is some possibility that the variables, the stochastic process, which is beyond our scope. Commonly, we call it the error that or the residual may have a significant part on the model. So the only mechanism that you can do is not to eliminate the error term and make the model deterministic. No. What I mean is that we have to minimize what the error term can do and magnify the influence of the variables that are already controlled, the regressors. So, for example, the incidence of drought in TVRT would impact 1% of the GDP of Serbia. Okay, this is already proven. This may be true or not. Okay. The level whether this is going to happen or not depends on only the level of significance that we are going to achieve, the confidence that we are going to do. So this is already a stochastic process we are going to do. But remember, in the very previous section, we already said that deterministic is that we can calculate it. But this one, so what we do, as far as the notation is concerned, then if we are going to collect, meaning that data could be collected over a continuous period of time, or data could be collected at a discrete point of time. That is the key. For example, if the data is collected, we use in a continuous format, why is this subscript which we call it this one? For example, the amount of electricity that is generated in hydro dam of Gibe. Do you think that it will be interrupted? No. Every second. every hour, there is generation of electricity. So the time interval, there is no interruption at all. It is collected over a continuous period of time. So we call it this one, YT, the first one. But if it's collected at a discrete time, for example, every week, every month, every year, okay, it is already discrete because there is intervals. So we use this one notation, this one. Having this in mind, then anything that's not clear so far regarding the very nature of sounds. Something that you need to make it clear before I go to the stationarity concept.
Okay, Dr. Surafit.
Abid?
Okay, please, you can, I think you can remove the participants who are disturbing the session, unless we are not hearing properly your presentation.
Okay.
I think the host can remove the participants, or he can mute all of the participants' audio.
Yes, this is a good advice. All the participants should be mute.
I hope the host better. እኔ ጋም ቢያለኝ ምኑ ካለ ተማው
Unmute, I mean mute all of the participants or
ያ እኔ ጋር እንትን ማድረግ ፕሪቪሌጅ አልሰጠኝም።
ዶክተር ይስሐቅ
የተወሰኑ ሰዎች አሉ ይታየኛል፣ ግን አሚዩት ማድረግ አልቻልኩም።
አይ ቲንክ ዶክተር ይስሐቅ ማድረግ ይችላል ይመስለኛል።
ኦኬ
ፖስት ያደረገው እሱ ነው አክሴፕት የሚያደርገን ስለታና
ዶክተር ወይስ በድምጽ ይነገራቸው ሁላችሁም ድምጽ አማርኛም ቢሆን
ሄሎ ሄሎ
ኦኬ ሁላችሁ ሚዩት ያላረጋችሁ ሰዎች ድምጽ እየረበሸን ነው፣ ሚዩት አድርጉልን።
ወንዳለ ከተማ ወንዴ ዘነበ ባካችሁ አንሚዩት አድርጉ። ዘነቡ ታደሰ ባካችሁ ሚዩት አድርጉ። ከተማ
ክፍሌ መራሩም ሚዩት ያርጉ።
አድርጓል እሱ አድርጓል።
አንዷን
merging a data mean, for instance, I want to study about
Hello.
poverty or determinant of poverty in Ethiopia, and my case study is in Oromia, right, Amara, Afar, and Elba. And I think there is universal difference in indicators are collected their own categorize different variables depending on I can
ወንዳለና ከተማ ወንዳለና ከተማ
the gender demographic character they collect socio-economic variables things like as income, saving, consumption, and other issue. When I went to compile those data,
okay. Now it looks good. May I proceed, Isaac? Hello, Isaac.
Hello.
አሁን ጥሩ ይመስላል። Can we proceed?
You can. Only two guys are unmuted, but you can start and we try to unmute them as much as possible.
Thank you so much. Now,
Thank you.
Okay. Now that I hope we have already told one important concept, that the way the time series generated should be, okay, stochastic. That is the most important element, that because there are some time at which some of the data set could be already a function of time, a trending time. Okay, for example, if the data is already entirely a function of time, then no doubt that even if the data looks very good while we are already making plots, the data could not be stochastic. That is one of the basic critical matters that we have to see. One important element that we have to understand, that the data should be, meaning it should not be as well as seasonal. For example, cyclical. Look, for example, in the Ethiopian context, probably it may also works for other countries too. For example, spending may be high every Christmas. Do you think that is really true? For example, consumption spending. So if you already correct spending over 10 years time, across times, and if you see seasonal fluctuation, then no doubt that during Christmas or New Year, there is spending, consumption spending by households will be a bit higher and gradually falls down. Then when another year comes, it goes up and goes down and the likes. So you'll see some cyclical pattern. This type of time series is completely non-stochastic, and you have to be very careful. So one of the most important elements that we have to think over is that the irregular component, the stochastic process, that we cannot 100% control is a very critical component that we need have to be very careful in time series setting. With this one, when we come to the point of stationarity data series this time. If you have already so far any question, comment, or compliment, you can already raise your hands and continue. Otherwise, we'll continue. Then another important concept that I have to understand, this one is the concept of stationarity in time series data. Okay, look, for example, these two diagrams. Look to this graph, YT and ZT. Now, this YT and ZT, a very clear difference between. So the horizontal axis is time now. This is time. Look. So the vertical axis in the left side of the panel YT is somehow already. Rather, it is fluctuating around the mean. Okay, this is a straight line. The large straight line is the mean of y, which is the expected value of y given time. Okay, the conditional probability. So this is the mean y bar, or the expected value of yt in our statistical language. So meaning that there are ups and downs by crossing the mean like this one, and we are observing some fluctuations around the mean. So the mean, if you make a regression line, this mean is supposed to be certain what? Constant. It looks constant because the slope is supposed to be 0. But what happened in this side, the right side? The ZDT series. Assume this could be income. Assume this could be consumption. And this side, you are observing that over a course of time, there is fluctuation. Now, one, like this one. Ups and downs are already there. Then, but another different property is observed here. What's that? Even if it is already fluctuating, it looks that if you already make a regression ZDT, expected value of ZDT, over time, we'll see some regression line, okay, like this one, okay, upward sloping. Don't you think that? So it means that the mean itself is already changing over the course of time. The mean is an increasing function of time. When the mean, not only the fluctuation itself, but the mean itself is changing. But on this side, the mean is supposed to be constant. And the series, the stochastic process is already trending ups and downs in an irregular fashion. So this is something important to understand the concept of stationarity in time series. Now, look, what is this? What can we learn from this now? On this side, the left side of the figure, meaning that the white series, when the minutes are supposed to be constant, the values yt are generated by a random noise. Now, there are none, meaning that we observe no trend. We observe no trend, meaning that it is not already an increasing function of time, neither it is a decreasing function of time. This is one important element, meaning that it is invariant with time. The series is invariant with time. So the mean is constant. Another issue is that there is no seasonal fluctuation because the shape here itself is the shape of the curve is fluctuating in an irregular fashion, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. There is no pattern itself. There is no cyclical fluctuations. There is no periodic or seasonality observed in that side. Had it been the case, we'll observe that, okay, the pattern will be completely cyclical, the graph. And hence, this implies that no seasonality, no fluctuation, no trend, and we call that this series is supposed to be stationary. This is the concept of stationarity. But in the left right here, the ZT series, remember that ZT is an increasing function of time. Along with time, then the series is also changing. ይሄ በአማርኛ እኮ አበሻ ሲናገር አንዳንድ ጊዜ ሰጠው ቀልብ ምናምን አይነት ነገር ይላል። የአይነት ማለት እኮ ነው። ኦኬ ጊዜ ያነሳል፣ ጊዜ ይጥላል። ኦኬ ይሄ የሆነ ነገር አንድ ለውጥ ሊመጣ ይችላል፣ ያ ለውጥ ይመጣል። ግን ኖርማሊ ፕራክቲካሊ እንትን ስላለው ሳይሆን ኦኬ የሩት ኮዝ ኖሮት ሳይሆን ግን ጊዜ በሰጠው ምክንያት የመጣ እንትን ነው። ኦኬ the typical growth parameter is almost the South Korean growth is already ultimately ጊዜ የቀዝቃዛው ጦርነት እንትን ያመጣው ለውጥ ነው ultimately እና it is not because South Korea was already smart enough to get development and to become one of the developed nations this time. South Korea was essentially developed because of time. So this implies that ZDT sometimes there are times that's already windfalls that comes into play, then this would play. So this condition is non-stationarity time. So one important element is one essential problem that we can take into account while dealing with time series data is that the role time plays in the series. So I have to be very careful now. So what does it mean in general? So stationarity means the statistical properties of a process during time series do not change over time. What does the statistical properties mean? Statistical property mean, for example, is one of the statistical properties that we can already we can calculate or predict and somehow generalize about the population. Mean, median, okay, variance, standard deviation, skewness, kurtosis, okay, higher order moments, okay, all this. So this implies that this will not change over time. The series will be constant. One thing. Look now. If this is the real cases, what did you observe? The previous graphs. On the left side, the mean is supposed to be, we have already observed only one statistical property, that is the mean. To the left side of the data, the series, we observe that the mean is constant over time, whereas in the right case, the mean is also changing. This means, look now, another important concept that you have to capture into your mind is that it doesn't mean that the series does not change over time. Just that the way it changes does not itself change over time. This is the most important element. When we talk about changing, we are also reserved. The mean should be constant, we are saying. For example, if you already make regression between y and x, and if you establish a very simple linear equation, for example, this one, the example is this that I already observing. This y is a function of x, and assume you fit a linear equation that y is equal to alpha plus beta x, where beta is the slope parameter. What does this mean? When x changes, y also what? Changes. No doubt. When x changes, y changes. Meaning the series changes, it means. But what makes constant? But the way at which, okay, the way at which y changes is constant. This is beta. The partial effect of x on y is the slope parameter beta. This slope is constant over time. X, when x changes, no doubt that y changes. When already there is an investment in the economy, no doubt that then growth will come. If there is an investment, no doubt that employment will come. If there is an investment, no doubt that export will come. So if you make this regression, no doubt that the series will change. So this implies that when this concept is already means, okay, stationary means the statistical properties. We are dealing about the beta values now. The mean values, the variance, the others will be supposed to be constant. But the series can change over time because we are living in a changing world, nothing is static. But one important property that we have to keep in that the way it changes is constant, meaning that it should be predictable. Unless it is predictable, what is the role of making the model? For example, why are we doing about statistics? Why are we doing about this mathematical equations and others? So the whole sense is, remember time series data. Time series data is data that has been collected over the past course of years. It is data I was talking about yesterday. So yesterday has already passed. Why are we doing about while yesterday has already passed and we're already waiting for the most important element that you have to understand is that we collect information from the past, we make analysis based on this data and forecast about the future because data can speak themselves. So the whole sense of making econometrics, the whole sense of already making regression analysis, the whole sense of collecting data on the past is to predict about the future. So prediction is possible, whereas the stochastic process is predictable. So this implies that, meaning we have to know how y changes when x changes, predictable. Otherwise, it is not important to make already made a model. It's not already feasible and useful to collect data on the past. So that means the way it changes should be predictable. That is one important element that you should do. So if we have this concept is, if you have this concept is, let's formally define. Let's formally define what stationarity and non-stationarity is to mean. Because at least we have already some background information about this concept. Okay, look now, to formally define, we will already define two types of stationarity. The first one is strict stationarity, and the second one is weak stationarity state in time series state. Now, look, we have understood at least the importance of stationarity. We have very elementary concept this time about what the concept of stationarity means, meaning statistical property should be kept constant and should not be a function of time. That should be time invariant, such as mean and the likes. But the series can change, but this change should be predictable. That is the very important concept of stationarity. Meaning, if you violate this property, no doubt that we are in a state of non-stationarity, and the regression output that we are going to make and the outcome we generate will be totally fabulous, useless. So meaning, if stationarity is important, then one of the very concept is strict stationarity, and the second one is trivial. What does it mean? This strict stationarity means that if the joint distribution of any set of n observations, okay, n is already the number of realizations, we call it the sample in the cross-sectional setting. Sample equivalence is a sum, cross-sectional equivalence is a sum. For example, 30 years data, 10 years data, 100 years data, and the likes. If that is really true, if you have already 30 years data or something else, okay, GDP data, for example, GDP of year 1, GDP of year 2, and GDP of year Tn until the end of the data 30 years. Meaning that if the joint distribution of all the series, it means all the series is the same as the joint distribution of yt plus k, yt plus 2k. Meaning, if include, meaning if you already extend, meaning that this distribution by a lag length, we call it k. For example, 2 years, k could be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. It depends, because always selection of appropriate lag length is at so logical ground. So meaning, if the joint distribution of all the distributions of any kind of lag should be the same. Meaning, what does it mean? Look, strict share means if all its probability distributions are stable over time. We'll come to the concept of stability now. This implies, what does it mean? If we have the series of this year 1, year 2, until year 30, then we have already certain distribution. What is this distribution? Mean, median, variance, okay, standard deviation, the likes. For example, if you begin from year 1 to year 30, but if we extend, okay, the starting point by k, for example, 5 years, k could be 5, the length of period 5, meaning year 1 plus 5 will be year 6. Year 2 plus 5 will be year 7. Year 30 plus 5 will be year 35. If you already push, okay, the lag length by k and make another distribution, generate another statistical property, then the behavior that I observed in the first series and the behavior that I observed after I have already included certain k lag lengths will be the same in every aspect, no difference at all. The name itself is very strict. Okay, you have to imagine that mean should be the same, variance should be made, and as a higher order movements as well. Higher order movements in a sense, skewness, kurtosis, media, okay, and the likes. All this should be the same if you already extend by this lag length. Oh. Then what do you observe from this definition now? Okay, so meaning that the role at which time doesn't matter, it means. Meaning that if the joint probability distribution is the same from this observation and the second observation after I already extended our observation by k-like length is same, then the time, the beginning and the end is not a matter of the econometrician issue, rather the data. So the most important element is time is not important here, rather the lag length determines. Okay. So this means not only mean and variance, but also all higher order elements. I told you. Okay, this I told you like the kurtosis, skewness, median, and the likes will be the same. So this is a bit tough. Okay, time, meaning that if you already extend the lag length by any time, then no doubt that. For example, if k is 2, again, this is also another trouble. Why? 3 the same, 5 the same, 6 the same, then it will be very difficult to achieve. Then what do you do here? No, look now. The another important element is that this strict stationarity is very tough, as the name itself implies, and difficult to achieve. Difficult. Even there is no so far the knowledge of statistics. So far there is no any mechanism to test and examine whether strict stationarity is going to be satisfied or not. That is the mean. So it is true only in theory. Then what is the next? We have to go to the second option, and that is called the weak stationarity condition. What does this weak stationarity condition imply? So look now this. If the mean, the variance of YT are constant over time, mean should be constant, the variance should be constant, and the covariance, meaning that the linear dependence between the series to time periods depends on only the length of lag, because time is not there, then YT is then if these three conditions are satisfied, mean, variance, and covariance, not higher order momentum. If this is enough, we call it weak stationarity. So we can say that if suppose YT GDP would be stationary, that is collected over a course of time going to be stationary. One important concept that the mean, which is the expected value of Y, time should be constant. Then have you seen already do you remember the graphs that I observed to the left panel? I have already observed YT. So the mean was already not a function of time. It was already flat and constant over time. Another important value is, despite the mean, the variance in the sense that the average fluctuation ups and downs from the mean should be also constant. There is no significant peak, there is no significant crash. Meaning that the average fluctuation is manageable and within a certain range, and this is around the constant mean. Meaning that the fluctuation of the series will show a substantial fluctuation within a certain manageable range, the constant variance. The variance of YT means the variance of 2001, 2002, 2003 is the same. This is sigma square. So meaning that average deviation from the mean should be constant and manageable. Significant peaks and significant falls are not desirable, and these are not the behavior of stationarity in time series. Another issue is the linear dependence between the series over the course of time. The covariance of, meaning that the covariance of, for example, GDP of 2020, and we talk about K is already 5 years. then 2000, if this is 2020, then it should be 20 plus 5 is 2025, for example. If the covariance is already this one, okay, and the covariance should be some constant value. The linear meaning that if this is negative and this is negative, this will be positive. And if this is positive and this is positive, this will be positive linear dependence, going in the same direction now. Otherwise, if one goes up while the other is already going down, then there will be a mismatch and in between the two. So the covariance will be the same. So this is called generally a weakly stationary process. We call it equivariant stations. The real dependence will be constant. We call it. Now, if white is normally distributed, look. If white is normally distributed, weak and strict stationarity are equivalent because the normal distribution is already the same variance, the same mean, okay, the same skewness, okay. The median is also the same, orthosis is also the same. So meaning that if the distribution is normal, whether we are dealing about weak stationarity or strict stationarity, I mean strict stationarity, they're one and the same. But the very key question is, to what extent, okay, the data that we collect has, I mean, have the normal distribution. It is a bit far from the reality. There are very rare cases, okay, that we usually get from a normal distribution from our experience. In research, we are already dealing about many issues. We are going to test usually whether the distribution is normal or not. In many of the cases, even the students mark themselves the grade. This is not normal distributed. It's far from normal. The height of human beings, it was assumed to be normal, but practically it's not normal. So many of the issues in life are not already following the normal distribution pattern. But had it been the case, no doubt that there's no need of differentiating whether this trace is weak stationarity or if strict stationarity satisfied, no doubt that weak stationarity is also satisfied because weak stationarity is the subset of strict stationarity. Strict stationarity is already a universal set. So this means in economics, what we are going to do, weak stationarity is usually sufficient, as strict stationarity is difficult to satisfy because the parameters are very tough and their number is high as well. Because more than this one, area is constant, other higher order moments are also included. Otherwise, even we couldn't test it, whether this one is satisfied or not. If there is no mechanism so far, why are we doing about? So what's next? So the concept of stationarity here is related to weak stationarity. Meaning, having this background in the while we are already dealing about this stationarity condition, we are referring that the stationarity is weak stationarity condition. In a stationary time series, we cannot observe systematic change in mean or variance. You see, they are constant over time. Suppose we have an observation from t to time t plus 1. If you have already this one, from this, for example, to today, until some 10 years ago, for example, 2004, until 2040, for example, okay, then we may have some observation for 10 years or 10 years observation. And we observe that another similar observation for 10 years observation from t plus k, meaning if we include some lag carried. For example, 2 years or 3 years before, okay, 2004. And then if you collect again another, okay, then the distribution should be the same. That is one important concept, meaning that the weak stationary. So the statistical properties of these two intervals are much alike. Statistical properties, meaning the concepts of, mean, variance, and autocovariance. They should be the same. No more, no less. There is no systematic difference between the mean variation between these two. We observe no trend or seasonality. If this is really the case, we can do another important concept about this stationarity is for stationary series, shock to the system will gradually die out. This is another important concept. Look now, if you remember, okay, the previous graph to the left side, the series was already crossing the mean value many times, the constant mean many times. Meaning, when there are ups, then when probably it could be because of a shock, some shock. The shock could be already some policy shocks. For example, policies may be taken by the government to stimulate. For example, if there is a recession, the economy, no doubt that the government may take stimulatory action, improving the aggregate demand through its expansionary fiscal or monetary policies. That shock will already stimulate demand and may create upward rising growth. Then after some time it will go down when already price falls down, then goes down, ups, goes down. Then they are already fluctuating around the mean, meaning that the errors will be going to die over time. They are fluctuating around the mean. That is to mean that, look now, this is critical concept. That a shock in time t will have a smaller effect in time t plus 1, a smaller effect time t plus 1, and so on. This is what stationarity is. For example, this time, okay, this year, for the last 2 years, I can say for us 2 years, the Ethiopian economy was already suffering from internal war and displacement. This is a shock. Do you think that this shock, one shock, affect the economy last year at the same time when the shock was already? Yes, no doubt. Do you think that this shock is affecting the economy of Ethiopia this time? Yes. Do you think that this shock, the war shock, will have an effect next year? Yes. Do you think that this war will have an effect the year after next year? Yes. Do you think that this war will have an effect after 5 years, 10 years, in the next? Okay, this is a question now. Yes. But the most important element is what is the level of influence of this shock, war, disaster? Is the effect this year higher than the effect next year? The effect after 2 years? The effect after 3 years? So now we are already comparing the magnitude. Note doubt that the effect during the time very close to the war A years, for example, last year, this year, next year, is higher. But after 2 years, then the influence of or the impact of the war will be distributed evenly and will be going to be managed by different policies. Then its influence over a long period of time will be minimized and finally to die away. So meaning, when we talk about stationarity condition, the impact of the shock will not last longer. They will be already effectively controlled within a certain time range, and its influence over a long time horizon in the future will be getting minimum, 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 and minimum final reach to zero. That is the issue. This is the concept of stationarity in the context of macroeconomics. This means a stationarity process will not drift too far away from its mean because of the finite variance. Look now, we are saying that the variance is constant. It is manageable within a certain range. The deviations over from the mean 10 years before and 10 years after are supposed to be constant. If that is already constant, then meaning that the deviation from the mean will not go far away from the mean. Deviations are manageable and can be not significantly high. So the variance is already supposed to be constant in a very manageable. Whereas in the stationary condition, the shocks persist and will intensify themselves. The shock that was created one time will persist for longer. Persistence is already the duration of that. We are talking about the duration of the shock, the impact of the shock. For how long the shock persists in the economy, stays in the economy. And their influence is also big enough. That's already, you see, that's the big problem. That's called the concept of non-stationary. Meaning, if the series is stationary, a shock, the effect of a shock during time t plus 1, meaning that next year will not have a smaller effect in time t plus 2. We'll have a smaller effect in time 2 plus 2 and in time t plus 3. Okay, meaning that the effect of the shock, okay, this year will be smaller than the effect of the shock next year, the effect of the shock 2 years after, the effect of the shock 3 years after. Meaning that the duration, the intensity, the persistence will last longer, one, plus the intensity of the shock itself is becoming problems. It is far away, drift away. It is influencing the economy. That is one basic fact that happens. So the two are going in a different way. In a stationary series, there is a convergence. The shock will already die after some time, and the influence over the course of time will already decrease. However, in non-stationary series, no doubt that okay, the effect will be higher. Instead of dying, they are diverging. And that's the concept of stationarity. There is convergence, and non-stationary series means divergence from the mean. Divergence from the mean. So they are completely opposite elements. Then what do you do? What do you do if this is really the case? Look now, okay, in the macroeconomic concept, let me take your mind to this important issue so that we can link the stability condition or stability. And remember, in macroeconomics, one of the goal of macro policy is to create stability in the economy. That's right. Growth, full employment, equity, and stability. These are the 4 pillars of macroeconomic objectives. So this is stability. We call it in stats concept stability in macroeconomics, stability in economics. Look, for example, assume the bottom plane, where this is the price output plane, where aggregate demand and aggregate supply are already supposed to be determining the level of output Y and the price level now here. Assume the initial equilibrium was at E naught, where aggregate supply was AS, where expected price end is exactly P naught, and aggregate demand is AD, a function of G naught now. G naught is already assumed the fiscal policy or spending component of the government stimulus. Assume this is the economy, and the economy was generating this level of output Y star, and the corresponding price is P naught. Now, this is an equilibrium level because no doubt that one of the criteria to distinguish one point as equilibrium is that both aggregate supply and aggregate demand meet the side. Suppose the government understood that this level of output is by far lower than the desired level to create employment, to expand exports, and the likes, at least to stimulate the economy in general. Then what to do? What can the government do? Then the government has at least good policy instruments at its hand. What can the government do? Look now, this is the ISLA framework, the upper one. The upper one. Then this is a corresponding A naught. Now, equilibrium E naught corresponding to the level of output Y star, where this is the interest rate and this is the level of output. And LM was this one, LM is a function of real money balance. And IS was this one. So the government, suppose this is already the monetary authority that is the control of the government. Then to stimulate this element, one of the policy means that the government can take is that expansionary fiscal policy. Then the government may shift may increase its spending from G naught to G1. Then this IS shift. When IS shift, aggregate demand shifts toward this side. This side. Now, look now this point A. Yeah. And imagine that this E naught. What is this naught? EA, point A. This point A is again another short run equilibrium point. Short run equilibrium point. Because new aggregate demand is exactly matching to the existing aggregate supply curve at point A. This is equilibrium. This is the key point is that is this equilibrium stable or not? Is point E not stable or not? Is point A stable or not? Meaning stable, is this one E naught, equilibrium point E naught stationary or not? If A1 stationary or not? Look now. At this point, what we are going to see that this point was equilibrium point, stability point, stationary point, point E naught. But unfortunately, there is a shock. This shock, policy shock, stimulate aggregate demand from minor to Yn and increase the price level to Pn level. Then it will increase employment as well, along with the expansion of output. And the price level has already grown up. But at this point, no doubt that because price has grown up, the real wage of workers will be lower. W over P lower than this one. Then what do you do? But workers and employers do not have equal level of information at the same time. Rather, employers do capture better price information than the workers. Then now, okay, when workers after the payday were working, increasing the level of expansion of, more level of output produced, more level of labor employed. Then when they go after the payday to the market, workers observed that the price of the commodities, average price has increased, meaning that the real wage is lower. Then what they do? Next day when they go to the firm, they try to already claim so that their real wage will be corrected. One of the mechanisms that they could do is reducing the amount of labor hours they supply so that they can enforce the firm to improve the nominal wage rate. So meaning that through time, if you see this direction, okay, to the left direction, they reduce their level, reduce their level, and bargain with the firm. Then this curve will be shifting to this side. They move to the direction of E1. Then equilibrium will be reached, finally settled at point E1. At point E1. So this E1, at this point, look now. At point E0, market is equilibrium and wage equilibrium is also achieved. 2. At this point, the market is in equilibrium because supply and demand achieved. This deviation in terms of wage workers and employers are perception about the real wage is different. So there is disequilibrium on this side, the price level. At this point, workers will stop their pressure against the firm when the wage rate is corrected and believe that it is the right wage rate. That's at point 1. At this point, both the wage equilibrium and the labor market, the goods market is also in equilibrium. So this is a point. So there is E0 is stationary point as well as equilibrium point. Point A is equilibrium point in the goods market, but not stationary point. There is deviation. There is a chance to move toward this direction. It is not stable. There is a good pressure, but this point is already stable and the stationary state is already achieved. This is the very concept. So deviations from the mean. The most important element is, as far as we are talking about stationarity, whether this deviation, a movement from E0 to A and back to E1, is it really, meaning the deviation, the mean, the variance, is it really manageable, can be corrected easily? Is the question within a short term. Meaning that this deviation should not have lasting influence in the economy. So this either should die away over a long period of time. This either should be like when you move to point A to point E1, look now, from point A to point E0 to point 1, the error is already increasing. But after some time, when workers perceive that, okay, the market is a bit different and pressurized, okay, against their employer, no doubt that they are going to correct this error and going to E1. This will be corrected. This is what is called stationarity. We call it also macroeconomic stability as well. Any question, how, please? Having this in mind, why are you worrying about stationarity concept this much while we are dealing about time series data? One, if non-stationarity holds, no doubt that we can make any forecast, macroeconomic forecast, unless we have already manageable. We can control, get the way at which the data is going to be generated. How can we already going to predict about the future? So in non-stationarity, we cannot make forecast because there is divergence always. Okay? The role of the model is useless after. So that is a series issue to be described, the period. Meaning, if the series is non-stationary and we are going to deal about non-stationary data, we can make actual description of the reality. Meaning, we talk about the period under consideration only. If you have already corrected certain, we can make some analysis, descriptions on that 30 years period, 50 years period, or the same pattern. We cannot make any speculation or forecast or prediction for the future based on the past observation. That is impossible in non-stationary. So another important issue is that non-stationarity, if the data is non-stationary, it may lead at spurious regression. This is another potential challenge that we usually face in time series data analysis. Spurious regression means, okay, we may already make regression one series, for example, XT series against YT series. Then if you regret, we may find very important and plausible find, for example, would R square, okay, significant, and others. We may find that one. And we may make false conclusions. We may make false forecast without critically examining whether this relationship is true or not. Okay, that is another important concept. ይሄ በአማርኛ አይነት ነገር ለምሳሌ ሁለት ጓደኛሞች ዝም ብሎ ሁለት ሰዎች ወደ እናንተ አቅጣጫ እየመጡ ምናምን ባንድ አብረው ምናምን እየመጡ አይነት ነገር ቢመጡ እና የታቻቸው መታወቁ ቢሆኑ some of you that observe that እነዚህ ሰዎች ጓደኛሞች ልትሉ ትችላላችሁ። ግን እነዚህ ሰዎች ቶታሊ ተያይተው የማይተዋወቁ ሊሆኑ ይችላሉ። ግን they are already going on the same path. But they are not one is not a friend of the other. If they are traveling on the same path, traveling together, it doesn't mean that they are really true friends. መንገድ ያገናኛቸው ምናምን ሊሆን ይችላል። That is really the case. Then when you regress one YT series against XT series, for example, look for example, if you consider the Ethiopian economy, there is a big debate that not actually whether population is really a threat or an opportunity for growth. Okay, but let's assume that in many of the developing countries like ours, okay, statistical data shows that population is becoming a threat, or the higher population growth is a threat. But if you regress the Ethiopian economy for the last 10 years, I mean 40 years, and the growth of population, for sure you will see positive correlation between growth rate of population and growth rate of the economy. And even you may find statistically significant relation, meaning that population may have significant influence, population growth may have significant influence on the growth of the economy. But practically, when we test it, this may not be the case. This may not be the case. So we have to critically examine, okay, whether this is really true. Some type of situation is called split. So one of the potential challenges that we face is non-stationarity as a result of non-stationary resource regression. That's one important. We have to be very curious. Meaning that all bread should not be eaten. That is, all the breads that you get on shelf should not be eaten. Some of them could be contaminated even if they look healthy. That's the question. So meaning you should not trust all the regression outputs that you generate from time series data. Some of the regressions could be false at all. They don't mean to have theoretical as well as practical relation between the two. Even if so, it's as simple as you have to also question, okay, the relevance of statistical properties as well in time series. We have need to check it whether or not that series is transition. So if it is a spurious, another important problem that working with non-stationary standard assumption for a certain will not be valid. If the series is non-stationary, the usuality distribution, the FT distribution, they are not valid. How can we test it otherwise? So it is. Then this is another important problem that we have to critically examine. So how can we already examine? Test whether. So we have to talk about two types of non-stationary theory: random walk model. We will invest in this, and finally the trade stationarity process. Look now, once again, consider a random walk model, for example, this one. Suppose the random walk model, the current observation y is the current GDP is already a function of this GDP in the past plus certain shock. Okay? Meaning that your past performance determines your current state. The level of investment that was carried out last year plus random shock again would determine the current level of investment. So this means y1 means y minus 1, y0, meaning that the level of investment this year is the initial investment last year plus what? The random shock. What about y2? y2 means y2 minus 1 is the level of investment last year plus the corresponding shock v2. But this y1 is what? This y0 plus v1. We substitute those y2 is y0 plus v1 plus v2. Then this implies if you include generalize for yt, any time series is y0 plus v1 plus v2 plus until time vt. This is generally y0 plus the sum of the errors from the very beginning until the end. Look now this. So the level of investment at time period is the initial level plus the sum of all random shocks. All random shocks. Then what is the mean of y? Expected value of y? Y0. Because expected value of y0 v naught is 0. What is the variance of y naught? The variance is already a function of time because it is already changing. The sum is already changing. It's not constant. Sigma squared times function of time. Then what can we conclude about it? Though the mean is constant, the variance is not a function. The variance is a function of time. It's changing. The variance is changing over time, not constant. So meaning that it is non-stationary. This condition is not satisfied. Random equator without drift. Another important concept that I have to do is that suppose another model with a look now. Random walk. Random walk in a sense means that past values determine current state plus certain shock. So the level of investment at time t is suppose certain constant plus the level of investment made last year plus the shock, the corresponding shock in the same year. Meaning year one level of investment is a function of year zero investment plus the shock in year one. Year two, the same, y1 plus v naught. But this y1, if you substitute this one the above, then y naught plus v1 plus v2, which is equal to y naught plus 2a plus v1 plus v2 now. If you continue this y, year 2, 2 times a, 1, 1a, year 2, 2a, year t, a, initial level of investment, plus the trend component and the constant plus the v. Then what is the mean expected value of y naught? The mean is the expected value of v naught is 0. Y naught plus t times a. Variance, the same. So meaning both the variance, if you already include random walk with drift, no doubt that both the mean and the variance are totally functions of time. They are depending. The rule at which time place will not be eliminated. That is the most important element. So both random walk with drift and without drift are completely non-stationary time series. And this is an important benchmark to make important conclusions after some time. Now, having this in mind, let us test stationarity. Which stationarity are we doing now? We are testing the weak stationarity component because the strict stationarity is tough, plus there is no such a testing mechanism as well so far. So the most important and common approach that we are going to use to test stationarity is the interest test. What does it mean? Now, one critical challenge that we have observed last the previous discussion is that time is one of the variables that disturbs us in the analysis of time series. trending because time. Trending means the long run evolution of the process, okay, over the course of time. That was the role of trend element. Then, if you consider the supposed trend stationarity process, meaning trend stationarity process, to make the series non-stationary, I mean the non-stationary, one of the mechanisms that we have to make is that we have to single out or figure out the role time plays in the model. How? We can already single out time and include as one independent variable. So this implies the trend stationary for YT, for example, alpha naught plus beta t plus ut. Meaning, if you already single out, if time is disturbing, then we have to already single out and include time as one variable. For example, if you have already yearly data, GDP data, consumption data, investment data, or other data, notice that if year is one of the variable, this year can be used as one regressor in them. Then this implies the role times plays and the state of the whole system can be explicitly singled out from the model. We call it the trend stationarity process. This one of the issues. So this means that no doubt that if we are going to make this one, the error term follows the normal standard with mean zero and constant variance. With mean zero and constant variance. And this is stationarity. And we call it a trend stationary process. Another important concept that I have to understand here is the different stationary process. Suppose random model, whether be it with drift or without drift, it is non-stationary. Okay, how can we already make this non-stationarity series into stationarity series? We cannot already garbage out the data. Rather, we have to transform the data into a meaningful form. Before we make predictions, we have to already test it, transform the data into a meaningful form, and make appropriate projections of forecasting. So one of the mechanisms that we can do in that process, differencing, and we call it the difference stationary process. Look, for example, how can we already transform this random walk model into stationary series? Look, the mechanisms. How? Consider the random walk model once again. That we have. Remember, this investment that we have already made this time is a function of certain fraction, rho, this rho, certain fraction of the investment that was carried out last year, one period, plus the shock. For current investment is a function of past investment, the recent. YT will find this. Rho YT minus 1 minus YT minus 1. We'll find and factor out rho YT minus 1, rho minus 1, YT minus 1. We should factor out from this. So this implies the change in YT is, look now, can we already substitute this rho minus 1 is equal to alpha? Yes, no restriction at all. Then if you substitute, say that rho minus 1 is equal to alpha, this equation may become, the change in YT becomes alpha YT minus 1, where alpha is rho minus 1 plus the shock. Now, the most important here is, look, what is the root of this equation now in our quadratic equation form? Root is that meaning that okay, the solution set that when okay, the parenthesis equal to 0. So this implies the root of this equation is 1, rho which is equal to 1. If rho is equal to 1, this will be what? 0. The solution. Rho is equal to 1 means alpha becomes rho minus 1, 1 minus 1 is equal to 0 now. Alpha is equal to. We are systematically transform this model into testable hypothesis now. Should critically observe. So in testable hypothesis, alpha yt minus 1 plus ut. Now, if rho is equal to 1 or alpha is equal to 0, we call it there is unit root problem. Meaning the root of this question is rho. Rho is equal to 1. It is unit 1. And we call it the problem we suffer is unit root, the root of the equation 1, and that's called we unit in other words. So we call it the name it is given for. So if rho is greater than 1, if rho is greater than 1, this implies that this one, if rho is greater than 1, the influence of last year, the impact of last year on current period is more than proportionately. It means it is a partial effect, meaning that it is explosive. Okay, the impact of last year on this year is very high, more than 100%. It is explosive, but in many of the cases, if there is some shocks that's already created last time, the impact would have high during the period at which the shock was observed. Then in the next year, then there is an impact, but the impact of the shock is for sure smaller than the impact that was observed during the period of the shock. Then in the year 2 years time, then the impact is already declining, and over the long period of time it will die white. But it is saying, this one is saying that the impact is already of year t plus 1 was higher than, the impact of year t plus 1 was smaller than t plus 2, smaller than t plus, meaning that for the latest time, the impact is becoming higher and higher. And in many of the practical cases, this is not very common in many of the time series and econometric data. Rho is equal to this unit root, meaning that unit root means that the series is non-stationary if rho is equal to 1. If absolute value of rho is less than 1, this one, meaning that the impact of last year is getting smaller and smaller, meaning that the impact, the negative impact of the shock is dying over time. So we call it, this one is the stationarity. Let me see, give you another important concept to look here. Look at the following, why this is the case. Look, the investment this year, for example, why it is a function of investment last year plus ut, where this u, rho, is the proportion, the partial effect of yt, lagged value of investment on the current level of investment. This implies what about if you translog, this one, yt minus 1, lagged value of last year, this one, again, rho yt minus 2, plus ut minus 1, the corresponding lag. So if you substitute, okay, this yt minus 1 here in the first equation, but this one, from this one, we'll find yt is rho times yt minus 1. This one, if you substitute this equation, we'll find this, and rearrange rho square yt minus 2 plus rho yt minus 1 plus it. What about the level of investment 2 years ago? Yt minus 2. The level of investment 2 years ago was again a function of its predecessor investment 3 years ago plus ut minus 2. But if you substitute ut minus 2 here, This minus 2. Okay, by this equation, then we will find yt in this one. Pq, yt, and the legs. Look, generally, look, for t successive substitutions in this one, we get this, the level of investment this time is a function of rho t plus 1. For example, year 1 is equal to p square, rho square. Year 2 cubed. So it is t plus 1 plus its lagged value plus this one, okay? T plus 1 and the like, so that's quite for like. So what does it mean now? Let me come to that point here. My interest is here. If rho, this one, is less than 1, for example, 0.5. What is this one? The exponent. Rho t is approach to 0. That's not, this figure will be 0 if rho is equal to 1. This figure, when t is growing, it will be approach to 0 when t is very large enough. Meaning that the shock that was created one time in the system will gradually die away instead of becoming explosive. And we call it that stationarity is happening. What will happen if rho is equal to 1? This is rho, any number to the power of 1. I mean, 1 as the power of any number is also the number itself 1 for all t. Meaning that the level of shock that was created last time affects this year in the same proportion, 100%. It is persisting. No more, no less. It is persisting. So it is a state of non-stationarity, okay? And we call it a random walk model. Then the model can mean value and others be the sham, meaning the error that was created one time never die away, rather it's persisting for a long period of time. The sum of the shocks that we have already observed brings a random walk. If, okay, rho is greater than 1, no doubt that this figure will be exploding more than proportionately. And this is many of the cases, untrue in the practical life of our data, econometric data. So what do we do? In doing so, hypothesis testing, we have to go to the hypothesis testing. What type of hypothesis tests we should do? One is already the Dickey-Fuller test. We call it the Dickey-Fuller. This is an implementary form of test. We can use Dickey-Fuller test for the model. So Dickey-Fuller test is testing that the change in YT, meaning it was already this one. Okay. This one, look. YT into, we are already making a different stationary process because it was a random walk. Never there Y, and it is not stationary. But to make it stationary, you have to make different stationary. But look down this one. YT into YT minus 1, we'll find change in YT. Rho YT minus 1 minus YT minus 1. I have deducted YT minus 1 from both sides. Then we'll find this one, rho minus 1 YT. Then we can make regression on this side now. Look. Rho minus 1. When rho is equal to 1 means the series is non-stationary. But how can we test? Because many of the cases, this is one tail test. This means rho is equal to 1 against rho less than 1. This is untrue if many of the statistical packages, usually including Stata, says that the null hypothesis that beta is supposed to be 0. Make a two-tail test that beta could be different from the alternative one. So to be compatible and meaningful, we have transformed this rho minus 1 into meaningful pattern. Rho minus 1 is equal to alpha. And the root of rho is equal to 1 means alpha is equal to 0. If alpha is equal to 0, then we can test it without any problem in any software as well. And the null hypothesis alpha is equal to 0 means rho is equal to 1. It is the stationary or unit root or random one against alpha different from 1, which is already, different from 0. Then we can run to tail test. In this side, it was difficult, but in this side, transformative model, it is easy. Then based on this side, look now. The declarer that it took the change, the difference stationary against alpha into it. Then whether the null hypothesis is alpha is equal to 0, which is equal to uniform, again the alternative different from 0. But in many of the cases we use augmented decoupleur test, meaning it is a very comprehensive part and it includes all potential variables as well. So instead of decoupleur, we often and prefer to use the augmented decoupleur test, ADF test, because it's already complete. So this is the change in white. Look now, the constant is already included. Detrended, meaning the impact of time is already singled out. Look now, then we have already taken care of the impact time can mislead us. Then this is also managed. And plus, this component is the stationary test alpha yt minus 1 is also, this one is whether we are going to test alpha is equal to 0 in 3. So this is rho is equal to 1, it implies. And these are higher order difference values we can include as much as lambda I. The difference in yt minus 1, yt minus 2, yt minus 3, we can include higher order differences as possible as well. Because we start from gh equal to 2, because the first one captured here until higher order difference. Then we can test this one now and we'll produce. Then we will test it. It is detrended and whether the series is stationary or not. Then we can include as many potential explanatory rules are possible. Then now what do we do? So this is already differencing now. This is differencing. This is differencing. We are making the difference, not the actual time series. Rather, we are taking the difference of the series. And we have included this one to test whether the difference itself is stationary. The key question is that how many differences can we make? It depends on the data. This is the speed doesn't. Then we can make D difference. 1 difference, 2 difference, 3 difference. Many of the cases, if the time series is non-stationary by level, meaning with no difference, well, we will difference it 1 times and test it with the time series. If again the first difference is becoming non-stationary after testing this one, then we will again difference, make it a difference of order 2 for the second time will difference. If the second time will first order difference is again non-stationary, we'll go to third order and higher order difference as well. That is called, we call it integrated of order D series. How many? Okay, integrated of order. Integrated of order what? First difference. Order 2, second difference. Order 3, third difference. Then we are going to difference the series. But remember that one of the very critical elements that we have to understand here is that where we are making higher and higher order differences, then the number of observations will be becoming lower and lower. This will already minimize our degrees of freedom and automatically affect the efficacy of the model as well. From practical reality, the first and the second order differences usually give stationary series from practical observation so far. We may not go to higher order differences as well. Any questions so far? Okay. So one important element is here we have to understand as well spurious regression. Now, spurious regression for integration and error correction. So far we have seen stationarity, non-stationarity, stochastic process, okay, random walk model, and the legs and differencing and detrending. We have seen so far all these issues. Another issue that we have to cover is this spurious regression. This is a very short note. When we regress a time series, we may face results such as higher square. We'll get higher square. In many of the sciences, usually, as the social sciences, when they get higher square, they will be satisfied. But as an economist, you have to be very curious, okay, when you get higher square, okay? Probably there may not be really true and intrinsic relationship between the variables. And you may find also high affinity statistics, meaning that joint and joint significance and the role of individual significance variable of could be high, but usually the correlation between the two could be low. Okay, the Darwin-Assess low Darwin statistics, and this is usually inconsistent now. R square, 5, IT, very good. The statistics could be lower than the R square. If that is really the case, you have to suspect. Okay, oh, there should be some virus inside our model, and you have to be very careful to manage this virus as well before we are going to forecast. So this implies, if this is really the case, there could be spurious regression. And one of the potential sources of spurious regression is non-stationarity time series data. Non-stationarity, meaning no constant mean, no constant variance, and the covariance is not as well constant as well. If that's the case, it may lead us to the spurious regression. Then what do we do when physics regression? Okay, suspicion. The first one is suspicion. Then how do you suspect? Oh, from your regression model, with that, okay, see the R square, and finally from your Stata or any other software, okay, run the Darwin statistics to generate the Darwin statistics and compare sorry, okay, whether this R square of the model is really higher than the Darwin statistics. If that is the case, you have to say, oh, this regression could be somehow false and may not reflect the reality. And that could be one case that we have to use. Then look, we'll see that. So if there is, how can we already make ourselves safe from spurious regression? Okay, spurious regression. So to do so, one possibility is that we have to check whether the series are co-integrated. You see, this is whether these two series, for example, meaning that the series that you suspect that, okay, oh, there is some problem, the relationship may not be true. It is something that comes from wind fall. Okay, so if that is really the case, whether there is co-integration among or between the two or not. This co-integration means there a long-run relationship between the variables, the series. So like, meaning if the definition is that if the two time series are co-integrated, if their linear combination is integrated for the zero series. This is the definition. If the series are going to be co-integrated, meaning that their linear combination, not by their level, rather their linear combination could be integrated for the zero series, meaning that their linear combination should be integrated for the one series. Look, Meaning, order zero series means that it becomes stationary, the linear combination, not the original series, YT and XT. Rather, the linear combination becomes stationary of order zero. Order zero would be stationary by level, it means. Look now. Suppose the regression YT is another one series, which is beta naught plus beta ZT. ZT is another series. But we are not sure that whether the relationship between ZT and YT is spurious or not. Then what is the mechanism that we do? We have to find the linear combination. The linear combination is nothing but UT, which is equal to the difference between YT minus beta naught minus beta ZT. If this UT, the error term, the linear combination, is becoming integrator of order zero, meaning becomes stationary without differencing. Integrator of order zero, which means. Then we call it, okay, the two are co-integrated. Meaning they are becoming stationary after first difference. Look, what does it mean linear combination? For example, assume this is YT is consumption and ZT is income. Then meaning that consumption is a function of income. This means we are not really sure that whether consumption and income do have a longer relationship or not, or whether they have a true relationship or not. In theory, they may have, okay, but practically they may not have. So this implies UT means linear combination is, what does it mean? Income minus consumption, or consumption minus income, the reverse order. Or you often usually income minus consumption. What is income minus consumption in microeconomics? It is saving, that's what. So the linear combination is already saving function. This error is already the saving function. If saving, not consumption, not income. If saving is already becoming stationary, no doubt that there is no stationary and there is no what they call spurious regression. Then we, in this case, if we already the two are becoming integrated after one difference, then we call it integrator of order. After D difference, we call it integrator of order, like the differences. Okay, then that is the case. Generally, for YT and Z to be quantum, YT and Z3 must each be integrated for both. Co-integration should hold true for both in the same order. First order, second order, third order, both sides. Then finally, they become integrator of series, meaning that integrator of order zero series means that the series is stationary. But this may achieve, okay, integrator of order zero series stationary may be achieved after first difference, second difference, or generally D difference. Because this is already integration, we call it integrator of orders, establishing longer relation. So this means co-integration tells us YT and ZT have longer relationship, have the same. So this implies they are already measured by level. Look now, they are not measured by differences. If they are already co-integrated in the graph order zeros, meaning beta 1 measures the long run coefficient. We also call it the co-integrated parameter. Okay, this is the relationship between the two now. By level becoming integral for order zero series and becomes stationary, meaning that there is a long run relationship between consumption and saving because they are living in the long run. And the order is called co-integration parameter. How to test it? The co-integration parameter. With this one and the other, you will see that. The very common is the Enger-Granger test, and also there is the sentence that is left for you and for reading. This is one is also this one is common. How do you say? Then the decflutter, it is based on testing unit rates, UT estimated from the co-integration. What do you do? To test whether there is unit root or co-integration between the two, what we do is, remember, to check random walk, stationarity or not, this was YT, and this was YT minus 1. It's immediate lagged value. We have transformed this concept into the co-integrating parameter to check whether there is longer relationship between the two sequences. Then what we do is that we have to predict the error from the regression, the level, from this equation. Then from this equation, look now. We will regret this one, consumption and income. Predict E hat, U, linear combination now. Okay? Then we make the difference of the predicted error. We generated again lagged values of the predicted error. Then another white noise. And we have to test whether alpha this one is 0 or not. Alpha 0 means the very previous version it was unit root, meaning that the series was stationary. Alpha in this context 0 means no co-integration, meaning that consumption and income, YT and ZDT, do not have long-run relationship. This was the second one you will see at home, so that we'll not get out of time. So once co-integration test available, the long-run relationship equilibrium is proven. Okay, we will state. Then there should be short-run, might be short-run disequilibrium point. Okay, there is wave along the long-run transmission path evolution over time. Usually trends are only going up and down, going up and down. These are fluctuations from the mean, short-run disturbances with short period of time, but there are fluctuations. These are disequilibriums, short-run disequilibriums that can be corrected by usually by demand side and supply side policies. Then this is called the error term in the co-integration. So we call it this one the error correction mechanism. This is the short-run correcting mechanism, meaning that this fluctuation in the short run will be easily corrected, and that behavior is called short run. So short run are changes from the long run path. Look now, you see the change in YT over a short period of time. Look now, the error correction previous. This was already the long run behavior by label, but this is already the difference because output was already changing over a short period of time, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Along with what? The change in ZDT. Okay, that is also changing ups and downs. What are the changes over the course of time? Where difference between two time periods? Where changing? Okay, from 1993, we are already making the difference. What is the fluctuation? These are short-term behaviors, changes. But the level is already the long-run path for a longer evolution, long-run evolution. So these are the changes over T now, alpha. This is a short-run parameter alpha. The change in YT as a result of change. But this is beta is the long-run parameter, the impact of ZDT on YT. This is the short-run impact of ZDT on YT. And this one, alpha 2, look, alpha 2 is the coefficient of the lagged value of the error. The error. 1 period lagged value. And this now tells us the amount of the gap between the short run and the long run, deviation from the mean, this one. Okay, it tells us by how much the next year policy should be corrected by 10%, by 20%, by 30%. This will tell us the size of the corrective policy measures that we are going to take. This is the short run impact. Having this in mind, let's see the Stata part of it to understand this one. Anything you have so far? Anything? Isaac? Are you with me? Are you with me, guys? Yes, thank you, Tadele. Okay, so let me show you, okay, this concept is into the Stata. Thank you. I'll share you the materials, no problem, okay? I'll show you the materials. I'll share to the Isaac, then I will show you. Then let me show you the some Stata, okay? Not to shift, okay, Windows and waste time. I've already transformed, okay, the regression output and the command is in this window so that we also share it later on. Then look now, hands-on using Stata, we'll see this one. Look, suppose I have already used the real Ethiopian data, 30 months data, macroeconomic data from 1980 to 2030. Selected variables. Okay, export, GDP, growth, GDP deflator, consumption, and others. Okay, we have already. Suppose my intention is for simpler reasons for this exercise. Okay, how is the growth rate of export? Okay, I have transformed them into logarithm forms and others, the level forms, so that this will be given meaningful and elasticities. Then the logarithm of export is a function of, suppose, real GDP, growth rate of GDP, and learned GDP deflator. And look now, this learned GDP deflator is nothing but when transformed into logarithm of GDP deflator, this is already inflation. That's what the meaning of inflation. So how during this period the export sector of Ethiopia research for this period is influenced by growth rate of the GDP and the inflation plus the shock term. And as suppose we fit oil less and see the result. Look, see. This is the command, this one, simple oil less, I fit it. Okay, after I have defined that this time series. Okay, the Stata default, I hope yesterday Isaac has already introduced you very well. The Stata default is already cross section, and I have to already introduce Stata that it is already time series. I made it so, and simply we make oil less for time series data, then regress len export and len GDP and inflation. Then finally I found, look, this is the dependent variable is len export, a function of these variables. Look, len GDP and the GDP deflator. Look now. And the number of observations are 34. The key question is, do you suspect the spurious regression? You see? Do you suspect the spurious regression? Oh, could be this relationship, this model could be fabulous. It may not be tell us the reality. Okay, no doubt that in theory, yes, inflation and GDP do impact export sector of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not a different country, I think. But because of some non-stationarity element may be included inside, a virus could be inside in this model. So before we interpret, the first steps that have to do is that whether this regression is really true or not. This relationship is really true. So you have to suspect spurious regression. So what do we do? To suspect spurious regression, we have to check whether this R square 87.39 is really greater than the Derwin-Watson statistics. Then to do so, what is the next step? I have to generate the Derwin-Watson statistics from the data. Then to do so, you have to give the Stata command estat d-Watson. Estat d-Watson. Then you will get it, the Derwin-Watson statistics 83.8%. Look now. This is 83.3. R square is 87%. Then what do you conclude? Oh, R square is greater than the d-statistic. So this express would be what? It might be, this is suspicion. It might be spurious. Oh, then what? Yes. Then what do you do? R square is slightly above the d-statistics. Then what? Go to the formal test of unit rate to all the three series. For what? For len export, for len GDP, for whether there is non-stationarity that was already amalgamated in the data. median, mean variance, and others are not constant over time among these series. Then I have to test the format of each variable. In doing so, then what is it? The usual test that we usually is the Dickey-Fuller test on this side, okay? The Enger-Granger model. Then Dickey-Fuller test, I said, look now, the command this one, Dickey-Fuller, learn export, then comma, I said comma, because this is the command. Then I have included the trend. Trend means, look this side. Look, this one augmented different. This trend T was explicitly included now. And this is the difference. Having this in mind, so you see, trend meaning that I'm detrending time. And I have included lag to periods. Okay, lag to periods. One of the questions that you raised in your before we begin this discussion, we suppose reading the length of the lag. How many lags? Okay, there are a number of issues. One of the very controversial issues is the length of the lag that I have to include in the body. There are a number of conflicting theories actually, but in many of the cases, usually for annual data, okay, if the data is annual data, the optimum length recommended is 1 or 2. If it is already the quarterly data, despite, okay, the size of the sample, if it is a quarterly data, the optimum length of lag is usually recommended to be 1 up to 8. And if it is seasonal data, it is about 1 up to 6. And there are also other, this is already what I'm telling you is already the recommendations that was given from Wooldridge. You can see introductory to econometrics book, and in that case you will find it. That's already the better information, but there are also others. And there are also other occasional information criteria, Bayesian information criteria to select to determine the optimum number of lags. But that's why I have already used annual data. I have included 2 lags. Then I said lags 2. Then finally I need the regression. Now what I'm testing now, learn export. But learn export is a function of growth rate of GDP and inflation as well. Now, then we'll run independent regression, Dickey-Fuller test for each one. Look, now Dickey-Fuller learn export, lag trend, lag 2, regress. Then I found, look, this is augmented Dickey-Fuller for entry. Then what do you observe? You see this side, this is the test statistics that this is the regression output. Look now. This is learn export. This is the change D-learn export. D-learn, because it is the difference. When you write Dickey-Fuller test, Dickey-Fuller will take the difference. We should not go very lengthy time, okay, to generate the differences, lagged values, and others. That takes a lot of time. But if you order Dickey-Fuller, immediately when you command this Dickey-Fuller test to Stata, Stata will automatically understand that you are already running a Dickey-Fuller test, and it will already generate the required information from the existing data, differences, lagged values, and others in RAM by itself. That is a very simple concept. So D-learn export, because remember the side, okay? Again, I'm coming here and there, so that you'll be clear about. This is the difference. Look now, the dependent variable. Look, I know. This is the trend time. This is the lagged value of the. This is the difference again of higher order lagged values. So this is already Dickey-Fuller test. Then look now, this is learn export. This is D-learn export, the change in learn export. Then lagged value. is 1, this one. Look, lagged value is alpha yt minus 1. This is the coefficient of alpha. I mean, this is already lag time. This is time, period. Okay, this is 1 period lagged value, exactly, yeah. This is 1 period lagged value, alpha, the coefficient with the series is stationary or not. Look, this is the coefficient of yt minus 1 period. This is lagged value, the difference of the lagged values. This is 2 period lagged values because I have already the first difference, and this is the second difference. And the trend is that this coefficient is the value of t, the beta. Okay, this is trend time. I look now, time is already significant. You see, time has already an impact, but now single out and already make it out of the detrended and out of the problem. We cleaned from the system. Now, the most important element that we are going to test is this one, t, lagged value 1, the coefficient of yt minus 1, this one. This is t is 1.93 now. Now look now from this side, summary table of the Dickey-Fuller test. This is the calculated tau value of Dickey-Fuller test, this one, 1.93. In absolute value, take it. 1% critical value, because we don't go to the table of Dickey-Fuller tau stat 6, because Stata will give us, okay, critical values at 1%, 5%, 10%. No need of going to the table. We have to compare whether this absolute value of this calculated tau stat 6 from the Dickey-Fuller test is really greater than this one, this one, this one. Then what will happen? This side, alpha, is the null hypothesis saying that no co-integration, no long-run relationship between line export and this value. So this implies this absolute value of alpha is less than the 1% critical value, the 3%, I mean the 5% critical value, and the 10% critical value. Then what do? We fail to reject the null. We fail to reject the null. The null is saying that there is unit root. There is unit root, meaning that the series of line export is not stationary. It is mean it's not constant. It is variance is not constant. It's covariance field. All of 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3 may not hold. May work. That may not satisfy. So that is the issue. So this series is entirely unit root. The series is non-stationary. To save our time, following the same command, okay, the same fashion, test it by your own. For the sake of time, I didn't go through them, but the command is the same. But the result is that all are, meaning not only line export, but also GDP deflator, and line GDP is also non-stationary. So simply what you do is that you have to already change from this command Dickey-Fuller, change line export and substitute by line GDP, and again for the third time that line Dickey-Fuller, line GDP deflator, the same trend lags are the same, then substitute and check them. Then all the 3 are entirely non-stationary. There is unit root, the problem. Then what to do? The remedy is not making regression by level. You have to make difference. The first difference of t terms. Then mirror the regression and check again the same fashion after you make the difference. That is a very concept that can. Anything that are not clear? Long-run relationship. What about the long-run relationship? Then testing for co-integration or long-run model. Then what to do? Look now. How do you use the long-run model? Look now. Okay. Look now. Long-run model co-integration is you have to generate the residual, take the difference, and the lagged values, calculate that one, and make the difference of this one from against its lagged value, the noise. And the null is that no co-integration being no longer. So what you do from the regression model, we have to generate these functions. Okay. Then testing for co-integral logarithm. First, then estimate the would-be Lagrange model, meaning Lagrange regression by level. If co-integration exists, then what do you do? Simply regress, line export, there is GDP and GDP deflator. This was the command from the Stata. Then what to do? We have to conduct the Enger-Granger co-integration test. Co-integration test. To do so, what we do? We have to generate we have to predict the error term you had. Predict you had. This is a command. Then this you had is a residual. Then after we predict you had from this Lagrange relationship, because this one is nothing but y minus, okay, this means a len export minus beta 1 len GDP minus beta 2 len GDP deflator. Then for every series, we'll generate error. Then when you give the command predict you had, comma, residuals or R, then automatically error terms will be generated in the series corresponding error terms. Then what to do? Then the difference of the error should be regressed against its immediate lagged value. So once we have errors generated, no need of generating lagged values independently by independent command, no need of generating the difference of U hat independently, because that takes long process and it will be manual. But when you give decoupler U hat after you generate predict U hat and give the command defuller U hat, you are running decoupler test for U hat. Then U hat, then decoupler test, this command will automatically generate the change in the U hat, the lagged value of the head, and regress that you hat against this one and give you the critical values. Look now. Then decoupler test for unit root, then or co-integration. Then you observe that then the D statistics, the calculated D value is now, tau value is 2.96, almost 2.97. 1% critical value is 3.7 around. 5% and 3.7 is greater than. So this is already, or the calculated tau is less than this one. So we failed to reject at this point the net co-integration. At this point, 2.97, and that's 2.96. So slightly at 5% level, the calculated value is less than the 5% critical value. So again, even 5%, we fail to reject, meaning that there is no co-integration between this one. But at 10% level, then the critical value is 2.6, whereas the calculated value is 2.7. So this implies that the calculated value is greater than the critical value at 10% level. So meaning 10% level is entirely accepted. That's what our meaning that ranges of alpha values are 10% are already accepted range. So meaning that there is co-integration 10% level long-run relationship between len export, len GDP, len GDP deflator. See? So this is the case. So long-run export. This has policy implications. As a policy person, when the government decides, okay, short-run demand management policies and long-run export promotion agencies, then the government should be very curious, okay, the variables that do have short-run impact, the variables that do have a long-run impact, so that the policy will be feasible and bringing
lasting development in an economy. And that is another important. So this is a very critical element, and that you have to very aware to advise governments in different consultancy workers, research workers, and others. So meaning that because in many of the cases, there is scarcity of resources in economics, and this scarcity should be properly managed. Then scarcity should be properly managed and carefully, especially in the developing context, the very small, meager amount of money should be invested in the area where lasting influence can be bringing the reality. So that's so one of the we economists are responsible to identify the factors that have already long-run and short-run influences, and which resource should be diverted. This should be the very beginning. Okay, so that is a concept that I have to do. Having this in mind, having this in mind, you say, okay, there is long relationship between these two, 13% every. Then what will happen about the short-run fluctuation? Because there are ups and downs, remember. So between two neighboring fluctuations, there are changes in X, there are changes in Y. Then again, another point, you will see the same pattern. Then these are short-run fluctuations that will be managed again, demand management policies as well. Okay, so long-run changes could be already so long-run fluctuation could be achieved in many of the cases by supply side policies. But I'm not saying that demand side policies do not have already long-run impact. Yes, they have. But ultimately, the more the greater influence of demand side policies already on short-run macroeconomic fluctuations and supply side factors, and this time technologies usually do impact the long-run growth behavior of an economy. That is why we in growth models, capital accumulation per worker, productive capital per worker, or technology augmented labor. We are already saying that investment on human capital, on technology, and others are already making. This would ensure long-run the development behavior of the economy. So what about the short-run model? Look now. I'm saying now, let me show you the short run again, the model that for a short, I am already finishing with some time. Okay, look now, this is the error model. Look now, the short run error correction model of the previous long run. This was the previous long run model. I already achieved that at 10%. We have already established long run relationship. But at this point, the short run is changes D. You see the changes D to IT changes. Okay, this one changes X, Z changing. So how do you treat in the Stata? This one changes the short-run fluctuations. Look now, you see? Then I say the regress D learn export. D means the Stata command, you know. Okay, the difference. D dot learn export, D dot learn GDP, D dot then we are only changing fluctuations short-run. Then and D, this is again I have included lagged value of U hat. Look, why? Look now again. Again, let me come again. Have you seen this word? Lagged value of U hat? This side? Yes. I have included this side like this. Lag L U hat, I said lagged value, the further option. Then I found that you see lender GDP. Look, this is their len, their elasticity, this one coefficients are lagged, that one. D1 GDP, lagged value GDP. This is len exposure dependent. GDP, lagged value, 1.3, the coefficient 3.6. Statistically, how much? 2.3. Oh. So it is statistically significant. Then meaning that GDP has a short run impact. GDP has a short run impact. You see? Meaning that this is last a 1% increase in the GDP will bring about a 1.36% increase in the export sector in the short term. Also, it is elastic. That's not. It is elastic. These are already promising variable. So meaning that invest more on to improve GDPs, more paying. Controlling inflation is this one. Look now. This inflation G1. Inflation is already T is already what? Very small. And absolute value of T is greater than T is value is greater than 10%. So meaning that inflation has no what? A short-run impact on export. You see, export, a short-run impact. Because of the fact that inflation has a longer impact. That's true. That's not. Because export requires production. Production is already a function of time. So the inflation, the impact of inflation this year, I mean the inflation that was observed this year would have an impact year after or 2 years after. Also short-run impact of inflation on production and supply is minimal, especially in countries like Ethiopia, where agriculture is suffering from substantial amount. So this is true. So it's zero. Lagged value of you had this one. Look, why? You had. This is the time of adjustment. There is deviation because GDP is the fluctuation in the GDP is affecting export. So this change is that every year it is an annual data. There is a 36% adjustment to correct or to equilibrate the growth rate of export due to the change in the growth rate of GDP. So meaning that there should be 30%, 36% or 36.7% adjustment should be taken every year so that GDP would have, I mean, export will be increasing by 0.1% in the long term. This is all I have for the time being. I don't know how got some clue or not. I took much of your time. You are tired. I know that we are teachers. We have to tolerate this lengthy period of time. Thank you so much. Any question, you are welcome.
Hello, hello.
Dear participant, you are permitted to unmute. Please feel free to ask any question from your side. Yeah, you can unmute and please ask your question.
Hello, Dr. Surafil. Thank you for your attractive presentation and attractive PowerPoint preparation. Any participant, you can ask any question which regarding to our today's section, which is time series data. You can write through chat box or you can ask through voice. Hello, doctor. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Isaac.
There is some question which in chat box you can answer for those participants.
Isaac, read the questions for Srafil?
Okay, the first one is what is the disadvantage of using pure time series model related to structural model? Hello, Dr. Srafil, please unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Okay, there is some question which are written in chat box. The first one is what is the disadvantage of using pure time series model related to structural model?
Yes. What do you mean? Okay. What do you mean about by this? The sense pure and then structural model. What is your understanding? Could you please make it clear a bit? The pure structural model. What does mean pure and structural model? The one who read the question, could you please a bit make it clear? So that reaction is to the point. Yes?
Just
Hello,
he
his
wants.
question is from Haptam Bogala.
Yeah.
Hello, Isaac. Are you hearing me?
Yeah. The question is arised
The
from
question is
Bogale.
Haptam Bogala, therefore, yeah.
Yeah. Hello, Haptamu Bogale, please clear your question for speaker. Okay, we can skip the question and we can try to I can try to read the next question. The next one is the mean always constant from stationary data?
Yeah, the mean should be constant. No, it doesn't mean that the mean is always constant. You will not find, you may not find a constant mean and a constant variance or autocovariance. This is true. If that is really the case, no doubt that life would be very simple. In many of the cases, from my experience, was practical teaching and research experience, in many of the instances, the time series is non-stationary more than 95% of the observation. So the probability of finding a stationary time series is in many instances 5%. Even literature also says this. Then what is expected from we researchers and scholars? So we have to now get the concept of stationarity and the impact that non-stationarity can already bring about and contaminate our data and outcomes as well. Then we have to make a formal test. Then we'll find formal non-stationarity, we'll find non-stationarity. Then what we do to make it stationary, to make the constant mean into the non-constant mean into constant, the non-constant variance into constant variance, the non-constant autocovariance into variable will take differencing schemes. So in many of the instances, you will find non-stationary time series. And that is my observation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is decay floor test co-integration or unit root? I think the question is decay floor test is used for co-integration or unit root?
Yes, both. For both cases, because remember that the very concept that decay Fourier test co-integration by itself is the transformed version of stationarity test itself, because we have said that in the error correction model, this one, Okay, let me show that one. In the error correction model, now look now, this is a co-integration. The change in YT now, UT. In the error, in the unitary test, this was the change in YT. This was YT minus 1. Now, in that context, when we take the difference in the series, okay, that one, the difference in the series, this side, then it is called stationarity test. Look now. But now, what we are saying, this form is transformed. Okay, this equation, this concept was transformed into co-integration long-run test based on very definition of co-integration and used the decoupler test as well applied this one. Look now, that side, this was the case. And this, remember, co-integration is bad whether or not the linear combination is stationary or not. So we are dealing about this linear combination, not the data. But the algebraic transformation is that the same as the co-integration, the error correction model. So we are already systematically managing, okay, algebraic mathematics and already transforming this equation into the decoupler test, so that decoupler test can be used to test both stationarity and integration. That this is.
Okay, thank you. The third one is when we are checking unit root, what is the necessary of including trends in the? I think he asked the Stata command to checking the stationarity for trends.
Yeah, sure. Trends, because remember, theoretically we have already said detrending, because one of the potential problem is that, okay, the data generating process in time series analysis, one of the possible, the plausible, practically the plausible virus that disturbs our time series is the impact of time. Time evolves. Time usually, without any real change in policy, any other shock, because of time, things will increase over time or things will decrease over time without bringing some changes. So time disturbs. Then that time may tell us that, oh, the Ethiopian economy is, for example, growing. Oh, it is already the Ethiopian is already double digit in the likes over the last 30 years. Okay, our politicians are telling that's why. But is that practically the case? Over time, yes, the population is growing, the land cultivate is also growing, everything is growing, but productive is not already growing at all. But the most important is already the growth rate of the productivity in the economy. The capital accumulation in the economy grows fast. Stability as well. But so that's already fabulous outcome. So meaning time has an impact. So time may give us wrong information and may conclude that, oh, this is good, this is bad, and this is high, and this is low. So this implies, unless we single out, if you are already interested to know the role of time, time by itself should be singled out from the model, be included in the equation as an independent variable, so that the role of time as one regressor, like x1, x2, should be estimated and separated from the error time. So that is the most. So to do so, the Stata command to give time as a regressor is the so-called trend command is given for. Trend is for time. Thank you. Any other? Any other, Isaac?
Hello, Isaac.
Hello?
Yes, Isaac.
Is
The diff-
there, yes?
The questions, there are more?
Yes.
Other?
The other one is I can't understand the difference between the convergence and stationary from the macroeconomics, which is ISLM model explained by a graph. Just what it makes the difference between convergence and stationary by using the macroeconomics aspect as ISLM model through graphical. Just you can explain the convergence and stationary through the macroeconomics aspect.
Yeah, sure. Convergence means, okay, you are already, it is already, you are moving, you are converging means that you are already minimizing the error, your deviation, okay, and coming to the stable equilibrium point. So that is the issue. I don't know whether, because I am already telling you some here, I am telling you this is already the macroeconomic framework from Azure. In fact, there is also another, I am already mentioning only few and elementary points about this diagram, but I don't know to what extent you all are familiar about this expectation formation in the adaptive expectation hypothesis in macroeconomics. So I don't like to mention that one because you may not be all familiar about that. At the same time, we come from different fields. But this is all derived from ultimately derived from that one and include the concept of stationarity. And for your interest, this is also available in Vijra. You can also check Vijra chapter 2, aggregate demand and aggregate supply, for further reference and to understand this concept of stationarity in this one. So this point is, this means, that's why you might be confused. It requires very in-depth theoretical understanding about this concept. That I was already presenting it in a very elementary manner. So this means that if this is aggregate demand and aggregate supply issue at this level of equilibrium, then meaning that when there is some shock, for example, expansion of fiscal policy, then government spending will be increasing, then this implies aggregate demand will go to shift to this one, given other factors constant, because the exogenous factor, G1. Then meaning equilibrium point will be moving from E0 to E1. This is only divergence, moving away from the steady state level. This is steady state level is stability, stable equilibrium. This is moving away. But what will happen? Because of the gaps that laborers, workers, look now, along with the expansion of fiscal policy, investment will grow, output will grow, employment will grow. Then it will be grow. The price will grow in the economy. But no doubt that is expanding. But over time, workers already perceive that, okay, the market price of goods and services in the economy is higher. And the amount of wages that are being paid is not as expected, not at this level, at point level, because workers are interested about real wage, the purchasing power of the money, not the nominal wage. Then this was already diverging from E0 to non. But what will happen after the shock? This is a policy shock. After, then workers claim to have better salary. In doing so, one of the forces that can do is that they supply amount of labor hours, so that shortage of labor will be observed in the market, and wage rate will grow up. Then they will move through time. They will move to this direction. Okay. Then meaning that movement from point A to point E1 is convergence. Movement from E not equilibrium diverging, meaning that going away from the stable equilibrium. Again, going back to the stable equilibrium again. This is convergence. So convergence is a movement to minimize the error, then correct, your past mistake, and reach at a stable equilibrium. So meaning that convergence is a path, a route that you are going to. For more details, I wish you should read this book, Hijra Chapter 2, Foundation of Macroeconomics.
Okay.